Well, I can finally claim that I've got a good start on getting my wings covered with the Vortex. I made a couple mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes, filmed them all, tried to put them all in here, learned some new stuff. I'm no expert, but I've still got all my fingers, and it came out pretty good. Welcome to episode 23. Well, it's finally warm enough to be working on covering the wings. Came home and I naively assumed that I was ready to start putting on adhesive. And then, as I mentioned in the end of the last video, I had some mismatch between the two sections of the Laker leading edge. So I used this long sanding bar, which I got a long time ago, and I sanded across this joint and I got everything smooth enough, but I did manage to break through the layers of the fiberglass on this outer piece. So I picked out all the pieces and came in last night and I used some high sol and I filled it up, ran a blade across there, so I'm going to sand that back down. I did put some scratch marks in it because I had fairly coarse paper on my sander, so I'm going to come back with some smoother sandpaper and touch that up. And speaking of not being as ready as I thought I was, there are some instructions in the manual to use some of this wood material, and I happen to have the original type stringers for the Series 5 type wing. I replaced mine with the aluminum tube, so I've got several pieces of this. Supposedly in the kit at the time, they gave you a piece of this material and they told you to cut it and make some spacers which bonded between the tank and the rib, because as the fabric shrinks, they don't want it to cause the rib to warp. And they direct you to do that both on rib number 1 and number 3 on the other side of the fuel tank. However, I'm not going to do that out here. And that's part of the reason I skipped this, is I thought I don't need that, because in my case the ribs are actually bonded to the fuel tank on top. This isn't going anywhere. And again, that's on rib number 3 only. And on this end I have the stringer material, which is going to keep this from drawing. And also the fact that on the bottom of the Series 7 style wing, the tension is going to be fairly uniform. I don't think there's going to be any force trying to draw this rib away from here. However, that can't be said for rib number 1. Go back to the top. I still have some potential for warpage, but this is where the Laker leading edge is doing me a favor, and it is providing quite a bit of strength. I can put some pretty good force in there. I can't make the upper part of the rib flex, but down here, rib number 1, it flexes pretty easily. So you can see that I'm just moving it because I also cut that relief in there to get around this fuel fitting. So I am going to be taking this piece of wood, cutting some short sections and bonding it in here to give me some strength so rib number 1 does not flex, because there definitely will be some force with the fabric as it shrinks trying to draw this in, and that's not a problem I want to have. And you can probably see at this point I have sprayed primer on the fiberglass parts. I didn't really have to do that, but I have one limitation on my Ortex fabric, which is that it does not have the light blocker layer. You can kind of see some translucence through there, and I was kind of concerned I was going to see the squiggly high sol lines and various fillers. I don't really think I would, but I didn't want to get covered and find out the wrong way on a nice sunny day. Give you a little close-up of this mess I've got going here. This is just as cured. I haven't sanded it. I may have some touch-up to do, which I will do with some superfill if that's what's required. I'll show you about this in a second. This is a challenge I'm going to have on my airplane that a lot of you obviously do not have, because I've watched some other videos and looked in some other build threads in the Kitfox forum, and most people are able to run these full length. Now, when I rigged my wings, I got these jury struts nailed exactly where I wanted them, but in order to get the spacing from the root of the spar to the lift strut and then get it perpendicular, it required that I shorten these. And some of you will recognize these metal pieces which go around the lift struts. And again, I'll explain this in just a minute. This one goes around the forward one, and you probably can't see it, but this one will go around the bottom one. And basically, anytime you have a large penetration in the fabric, you need to have some kind of a doubler. Now, places like this, where there's just a slit, most people get away with just some kind of a doubler. People call it a doily, which goes around there and just keeps that from spreading open even more, but those large lift strut openings require these aluminum pieces. And yes, you can see that the porosity in these Laker leading edge sections is not awesome. I have thought about coming in with a filler, kind of concerned about that, whether I just put adhesive in there and that takes care of it, or if it's going to cause the fabric to pick up this texture. I really don't want to add more weight to this. I wish these were better made. Anyway, because I have an odd shaped cutout and I'm actually going to have a little window here that's big enough that I can get this AN3 bolt through and a nut on the other side, I needed to have something which is a small version of these metal guys. So I got out some scrap paper and I started working on whether I would have this fit inside here, which I'm thinking about doing. This opening is kind of rough, but you get the idea. I would square that up and then just have this, and I'll bond it in here with some High-Sol, and then this is flexible enough that I should be able to push it out of the way and get the bolt through there. And that's not the only place you have to do that, because and this right here has been renting a little bit of space in my head, because if you use the polyfiber or any of the other polyester-based fabrics, the fabrics have a lot of flex to them. You could cut an opening and stretch it around this and also this lug, which is sticking off the rear fitting, probably no problem. But the Oratex fabric is board stiff. It does not like to flex out of the way. So what I'm thinking is that I'm going to have to cut an opening in the fabric ahead of time. Well, I debated whether I was going to show this part or not because it's a mistake I'm having to recover from, but I used some filler material, which I'll show you in just a second, to fill up some of the porosity and imperfections in the fiberglass here. And the problem is I didn't test it out and I didn't use enough catalyst. So for those of you who are used to the epoxy fillers, a structural adhesive where you weigh it out exactly 50-50 by either volume or weight in the case of the High-Sol. More traditional polyester based fillers, the catalyst is a very small percentage. It's about 2% by weight, and unlike epoxy, you can vary the amount of catalyst that you put in there between 1 and 3%. You can use the 1% to slow things down, give yourself more time to work, or if it's a quick repair and you need to move on with your day, you can mix it up a little hot. The 3%, and back when I was in the kayak industry, I used to mix it up pretty hot all the time because I was well practiced. I had my work focused, ready to go. And one of the interesting things about that is you knew you had mixed a hot batch because the paper cup or tin can or whatever you were using to mix up your resin would smoke. You could hear it crack and pop. It could actually, in extreme cases, catch on fire. Well, in this case, I had been down to my local body shop and I asked him about some filler to use, specifically on my rudder, and I'll get back to that on a different day. This is a Bondo-like product, actually, in the way that it smells and works. So it's actually similar to resin with milled fiber mixed in, and the nickname we used in the kayak shop was applesauce. If I can get this lid off, probably can't. I'll show it to you later, but anyway, so this was the catalyst tube. and I mixed up some. I didn't use enough catalyst. I was trying to give myself some working time, which I did. But then I came back several hours later, and it was not hard yet, which is kind of surprising. Normally you expect about 15 minutes, and the stuff is ready to sand shape, drill, or in the case of the milled fiber resin, you can actually even drill and tap. And so because it was cold outside, I waited till the next day, and it came back and I could still dig at it with my fingernail, and so that was a problem. And I debated whether I was going to even show this part because it's a mistake. Who's proud of that? And even up until about 10 minutes ago, all I was doing was making it worse. So what I ended up doing was taking a rag and some acetone and wiping it. Now you can see the two-part epoxy primer. I was a little bit surprised it actually comes right off with acetone. The Superfill and High Sol don't. I'm sure if I kept at them long enough, they would soften up. Acetone's pretty hot. So what I'm going to do right now is mix up another walnut-sized glob of that body filler, catalyze it, and stir it up and leave it. And I'm going to make sure that it kicks off, because one of the other things, when all else fails, you read the instructions, it said that it should be 75 degrees. Well, it's not, and it's not going to be until probably middle of July for me. So I read online some instructions this morning did say that the product should be 65 degrees. It's about 50 degrees today, so I'm going to fire up my heater, warm this place up. So I mixed up this sample to make sure that I was going to be able to get this stuff to kick off. I used 2% by weight per the instructions, and it is rock hard. And because I have just prepped this surface, now I'm going to dive back in, mix up a new batch of this, get it squeezed on here, sand that. The good part about this kind of resin is I don't have to wait 24 hours. Just sand this down. I'll be able to shoot this primer on, prep both sides, get the primer done today. Okay, well, I have recovered from my primer and body filler catastrophe. I took a sander with 220 on my random orbit, went over all the fiberglass, feathered in everything. I tested out the filler again in a separate cup, got that to work out pretty good. I think I filmed that separately. And then shot the primer over the top of the whole thing after I had it sanded. Also primered the right wing, so it's caught up. And yesterday I went down and bought a halfway decent shop vac, or at least I hope it is. I have vacuumed all the dust off of here. And so today is warm enough. It was my birthday, so I had a big party right in the middle of everything, but before the party started, I managed to get one coat of adhesive ready for the underside of, this is my right wing. And so I'm not touching that. You can see it's a little bit shiny there, which is the desired effect. I have a line of tape here, which is where that fabric is going to come to. And I'm going to pull this tape off as soon as I get the second coat of adhesive on here. And that gets me back to this guy, which I showed earlier in the video. I needed to come up with a metal doubler of some kind that went around here to leave room for, this is just my specific installation issue, where this bolt is going to end up in contact with the fabric. So I made my paper doll before, and I was never really satisfied with it, and I never turned it into metal. I did get some scraps of 8 thou aluminum at my local hardware store that I could make something out of. So of course I can't put fabric on the wing until I have this part figured out and installed. So here's what I came up with. Just shot primer on this a few minutes ago, but I was trying to come up with a shape for the hole, and I wondered if I could make a decent round hole in a piece of 8 thou sheet metal. And that is because the rectangle hole with radius corners didn't work out at all, so I needed to do something. And when I started looking at just round drill bits, I actually found a hole saw. It was the smallest one I had. And I would pick this up and stick it on here, but I just sprayed this side of this in primer, so you're gonna have to use your imagination here. But the round hole actually works pretty good, and then the fabric is gonna bridge over the first part, and you can see I also incorporated a joggle. So back to the round hole before I move on. Of course, I can cut the straight edges and the outside corners with a set of tin snips, which I did. But that hole in the middle with the hole saw, what I did is I took 2 pieces of wood and I clamped the piece of 8 thou sheet metal between them, and then I drilled through the whole mess. Actually, just the top piece of wood and then the aluminum. And for the joggle, what I really wanted was a set of flanging pliers like some other people use. And I probably shouldn't admit what I did here, because this is probably illegal in some countries, but basically I took the a couple of straight edges I'm not married to. I set the aluminum on top of here and I clamped it, and then I set this as a free floating piece, and I started with a piece of wood here to help just pad that from any major blows, and then I was able to use my dead blow hammer and form the flanges over the edge of this scale. And like I said, that's pretty savage, but it's 8 thou aluminum. It's pretty soft. Should I have bought a set of fluting pliers? Would I use them? Two different questions. I'd probably buy a set, but I didn't want to wait even for the Amazon truck because I've got that coat of adhesive on here. I want to put another coat of adhesive on it tonight. I have the fabric inside already with the 2 coats on it. So yeah, I'd like to stay up late and get this fabric attached. But what I'm probably going to do is get the second coat on here and get that guy mounted up. I'm probably going to rivet it and high sol, so you're still going to see a rivet head. No big deal, because at some point I'll probably make some kind of a fairing here. We'll see. That's my intent. See if I ever get there. Real quick, so this was primered last time you saw it. I drilled up for some 3/32 by 1/8 aluminum rivets, bonded with high sol, and riveted those in place. Get back to that in a second. I did have one rib in here somewhere, one of the false ribs where it had broken loose from the stringer, so I fixed that. At the same time, I had the tip in the glue gun. Anyway, 2 coats around everything. Fabric is inside the house, ready to roll. This is going to dry tomorrow morning. I am going to fake my death so I can get this piece of fabric on, get moving forward. This is with the iron set, probably can't see it and I can't, 90 degrees Celsius, which is enough to activate the adhesive, but not enough to shrink the fabric at all. And so as I discussed before, I started with this opening centered on here, laid it out to my scribe line on the other side, and started right here on this nose of the leading edge, tacked it in place long ways down while pulling a little bit of tension, and then started rolling on the other side. I didn't have a camera running for that. Having a little problem with the SD card still. Okay, so funny story. I put on the forehead cam, pushed the button, at least I thought, and set about attaching this fabric and shrinking it all. See how much I caught on 2 different cameras. But I'm pretty sure I missed all the cool part where I was chasing out various wrinkles, and there were quite a few. This is a difficult job when you're by yourself. But the final version is that the bottom of my right wing is covered. These are my cutouts with the metal doublers. Top and bottom. Any imperfections you see right here are, as people say, this is just like spandex. So these imperfections were in the filler material. It does in fact highlight all your mistakes. For example, I know of a couple down here. This piece still needs to be trimmed and I think wrapped around, so I haven't done that yet. But these 2 drips right here came from a wooden spacer. I've got some other footage of that, but that happened last minute. There's just any drip that you got is going to show through, any imperfections. So these metal trailing edge pieces have rivets, which I've known all along were going to have some kind of a bump. So it doesn't bother me. I know where it came from. I see all kinds of imperfections here, but in general, it all came out pretty good. This is not the final tightness. I just shrank it enough to get the wrinkles out and make sure that the areas with glue on them are completely set. I think I'm going to go ahead and cover the top of this wing and then take all that knowledge and put it on my right wing. Excuse me, left wing. I do that a lot. And move on. So one of the things that's unique to this one is the, if you can see it, hopefully I haven't cut this out, the Pitot tube platform. So once I get the bottom fabric like this over here, then I will install the Pitot tube, the Garmin Gap 26 probe. All the lines are going to go out. I'm going to run some wires for this and also the wingtip lights. Doesn't matter if the wing is covered, they're going through the rear spar, no big deal. But anyway, so I do need to have some wires for both power and for the CAN bus signal from my magnetometer, in case you're new. This is my MGL magnetometer, which I have out here in the wingtip with my mount that I made up. I'll try and remember what episode that was. Maybe I'll help somebody out if you need to look back. Anyway, so this side is all primered. I probably should take a moment and go through and look for any drips. Actually, just felt one right there, so that's embarrassing. I'll take care of that, and I really should have a second person for this job. It would make it less stressful, at the very least. So, but I do like my technique of cutting that opening, attaching the doubler, and starting the whole world from right there. This one turned out to be not that big of a deal because I got the leading edge attached. I'm trying to remember how much of this I might have lost because I didn't have the camera on. With the 4 edges of this fabric attached, then I started heating it up, trying to avoid getting it to stick to the false ribs and the regular ribs. But once I got the big wrinkles out, then I had to come through and start attaching it. And then I did the slow roll with the iron set to 130, where you make basically 3 passes, making sure this, I don't know if you can see it or not, this is one of the full width ribs, 1-inch cap strips, and here, and then my false ribs will be here, here, and here. Let's see if I can catch a reflection. Hopefully I'll pick this up. This is one of those things that I thought was kind of annoying about the false ribs, where they curve inward towards the structure. There's a potential to make some dimples, and I made some dimples that are much larger than what you see right here. So again, I'll try and look down here. You can see the dimples are barely visible. I'm okay with that. And I realize at this point I've filmed quite a bit. I've got plenty for an episode. Next time you see these wings, both of them will be covered. I'm going to do the highlights, I guess, on the stuff I've learned. Again, I'm not the guy to learn Ortex from. Get back to me when I've done 4 or 5 airplanes with it. But again, I like the process. I like everything, I guess, except the price. But again, this fabric came with my airplane, so I was along for the ride no matter what. All these systems have their pluses and minuses. Ortex is just where I'm starting, so happy to be using it. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for episode 23. Thanks for coming along. See you in episode 24. These 2 wings will be covered. Have some wire pulled through them. I'll be dragging these things to the airport, and hopefully by the time you see the next episode, my engine will be in the hangar with my engine mount, fuel injection system. So, big milestone. Thanks for coming along. See you soon.